Welcome back to the stories of the Jesse Tree. We're getting pretty far in the book right now. And today's story is called Jumping for Joy. The boy pinched up some sawdust from the floor and trickled it into his shirt pocket. "Your mother won't thank you for that when she does the laundry," said Mr. Butterfield. "She won't mind. She'll think it's sand. She says it's like the souvenir from our vacation, the sand in the suitcase." "If you met an angel, Mr. Butterfield, would you be happy or scared?" "Oh, a bit of both, I suppose, a bit of each, like Mary." And on he went with his story. Mary went to visit her cousin Elizabeth. 2 women, each expecting a baby, each with an extraordinary story to tell. Anyway, pregnant women always have things to talk about. Names and worries, clothes and hopes, feeding and fears, birth and happiness. But even before they met, even as Elizabeth walked up the path to Mary's door, their children were already in touch. The first Elizabeth knew of her cousin's visit was a riot of joy inside of her. Her baby seemed to be leaping and kicking, like King David when he danced before the Lord. Remember that story? Elizabeth hurried outside into the garden, puzzled but laughing and clutching her sides. And there stood her cousin Mary, smiling. "He knows! My baby knows! He sensed it!" Elizabeth gasped. "Mary, Mary, blessings on you. The blessings of every mother in the world are on you now and on your unborn baby. Feel, feel." As you came near, the baby inside me turned somersaults for pure joy. Mary laid her hands on her cousin's stomach. Her own baby's movements were still too tiny to be felt. It was like a magnet turning towards north. It was like a weather vane turning in the wind. It was like the oceans being tugged to and fro by the moon. The child in Elizabeth's womb, sensing the closeness of Mary's baby, turned in his watery world and reached out a hand. This other child was why he would struggle into the light of day. Here was his reason to live. "Oh, Mary," cried Elizabeth, "my baby is jumping for joy." "That's John," said the boy. "The baby who's leaping for joy? That's the baby who has to be called John, right? Angel's orders." "Angel's orders," Mr. Butterfield agreed. "But nobody knows that yet. Remember, old Zechariah has not been able to speak a word ever since that shock in the temple." "Scary," said the boy, and waited for the rest of the story to follow. "People fret when you get older. They fret about you," said Mr. Butterfield a few minutes later. "I dare say they fretted about Zechariah." "Because he wouldn't speak?" "Yes, and because he was behaving oddly too, I suppose. I'm only guessing, mind." "It would make you behave oddly," the boy agreed. "A thing like that." Zechariah's family fretted about him, for he was old and frail. For 9 months now he had been unable to speak. They just prayed God would spare him long enough to see his son born. But Zechariah wasn't sick. He had lost the power of speech, that's true, but illness had not taken it from him. God had silenced him, but had given him something far more wonderful in return. A son. The time came for the child to be named. The neighbors expected him to bear his father's name, but Zechariah rode wildly in the air. "Look," said the neighbors, he wants to say something. Fetch that wax tablet and the stylus and give it to him." When he had it, Zechariah wrote, "His name is John." Like the Red Sea parting back onto its dry seabed, words spilled back into Zechariah's throat. "His name is John," he said, and again, and again, and again. His name is John. His name is John. His name is John. Then he ran to the window and bellowed it into the street so that a whole flock of doves flew up from the roof opposite. His name is John. The church rang with noise. A startling fluttered about in the organ loft. Mr. Butterfield's chisel began to peck away at the Jessie tree like a spring woodpecker. Suddenly he could picture exactly in his mind how the bough should look. "That's my name," said the boy. "John." "Is that a fact?" said the old man, but he was paying such attention to his work that it was hard to say if he heard it or not. Tongues of wood curled from under the tip of his chisel, as if they were shaping themselves into words. He worked on, rounding foreheads, creasing robes into pleats and folds. He worked like a man inspired. He didn't notice when the boy slipped away, seeing as he did only the grain of the wood and the wood shavings falling to the ground like the molted feathers of angels. That's the end of today's story. The next story will follow tomorrow. Please join us then for the next one.